Hello, hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down. I am your host, Miracle Jones, with my fellow host, Kahari Mosley, and we are very, very honored to have a very special guest with us today, running for governor of Pennsylvania. We want to welcome Attorney General Josh Shapiro. How are you doing today, Josh?
Thanks, Miracle. I'm doing great. It's good to be with you guys. I'm glad I could finally get on. Austin left me some space here to get on and talk to you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. And in our short time, these are a lot shorter than our Monday night shows. Can you just talk a little bit about what's really at stake? When I had the opportunity to sit down with Austin, we watch MSNBC, CNN, and the various news shows, but for someone on the campaign trail and also working in state government, we hear about how important this midterm election is, but can you frame for our viewers, like really how serious this election is and how important it is for folks to get their voices heard this November?
Yeah. Look, I was on MSNBC last night, and the host actually said it's the most important governor's race, not just this year, but in his lifetime. And I think a lot of people maybe don't articulate it that way, but feel it, because this is a governor's race where everything's on the line. People's fundamental rights and freedoms are on the line. Our ability to make sure we create opportunities by giving every kid a quality education, safe communities, lifting up everybody in our economy, that's on the line. But so is defending our fundamental freedoms, our right to vote, our right to make decisions over our own bodies. And I am running in a race against, by far, the most dangerous, extreme, chaotic candidate in the nation, and certainly within, the history of Pennsylvania governor's races. I'm running against someone, Kari, who just fundamentally believes you and I shouldn't be a part of our collective future. You and I shouldn't have the benefits of a government that's looking out for everybody. My view has always been, you got to look out for everybody, no matter what they look like, where they come from, who they love, who they pray to. And this guy I'm running against is the only one in the country who's actively paying for and recruiting white supremacists to be part of his campaign. He's doing that on the website known as Gab, which I know as a Pittsburgher, of course, that was the website that was used by the Tree of Life killer before he went into the synagogue and murdered 11 people in Squirrel Hill. He's the only candidate in the nation who just a few years ago put on a Confederate uniform. He wore the uniform of the traitors. He wore the uniform of those who were defending slavery on the grounds of the U.S. Army War College, because he fundamentally believes that certain people's voices shouldn't be heard. Certain people shouldn't exist in our society. That's his view. And there couldn't be more of a clear contrast between he and I. He's incredibly dangerous. The stakes could not be higher. We got to get it right in this governor's race. That's why we're really proud of the fact that not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans are joining our campaign as well, because they recognize what's at stake.
And can you talk about what's at stake? You've been putting out a lot of great policy initiatives. Can you talk about some of the policy initiatives and your plans for Black Pennsylvanians?
So I talk every day about the need to lift people up who've historically been left behind in our state government. And by the way, that's not just true in the economy. It's true in our schools. It's true in our communities. But as it relates to your specific question, Miracle, you got to first begin the conversation by saying that you're going to give a damn about Black-owned businesses, right? You're going to be a governor that actually says, we're going to not only focus on trying to help that one Black-owned business, but we're going to help make sure the people who own it, operate it, work in it, can use that business to begin to accumulate generational wealth and opportunity. And so that's the way I begin the conversation. Then the question is, what kind of policies are you going to put in place? Well, Pennsylvania itself is the number one buyer of goods and services. right? And yet only 4% of all of our state contracts go to Black-owned businesses. That means only 4% of the materials we buy, the services we procure, go to companies or businesses that are owned by, Black entrepreneurs. That's wrong. And that holds not only that business back, but all of their employees and all of their prospective employees. So we've got to make sure we change our procurement practices to bring more people, especially Black-owned businesses, into the conversation and into our Commonwealth's opportunity. We also need to make sure we invest more in main streets. There's so many wonderful Black-owned businesses in main streets in Pittsburgh and Reading, Hazleton, Philly, communities all across Pennsylvania, yet Pennsylvania is historically not invested in Main Street. So Austin Davis and I have put forward a Main Streets Matters initiative to really focus a lot of investment in those small businesses dotting our main streets across Pennsylvania. So whether it's large procurement or whether it's more micro loans targeted at main streets, we have got to make sure that we make those investments. And I'll tell you something else. Public safety is important when it comes to a main street. Ensuring that every storefront is safe for the customers who are walking in and the employees who work there. That's critically important to making sure our economy can thrive. So it's about having a governor who's going to give a damn. It's about having a governor who's going to really put his money where his mouth is in the procurement decisions, and then investing in places like main streets to really help. So that's just some of what we're offering. And if you want to go on our website, joshshapiro.org, you can check out our full plan for how we're going to invest in business opportunities for Black Pennsylvanians.
Yeah. We saw recently you had a number of prominent former elected officials from the Republican Party come out and endorse you. Why do you think that is so important? And what about the current political environment, is causing these kind of unusual and uncharacteristic type of political realignment that we're seeing in 2022?
Well, Kahari, you used the right word. It is kind of unusual, right? And I know you've run campaigns, you've been involved in politics. Man, it's hard taking off the red jersey or the blue jersey, right? But right now, we're seeing more and more Republicans take off that red jersey and just put on the Pennsylvania jersey. Republicans who, by the way, don't agree with me on every issue, but agree that we got to defend our democracy and our fundamental rights and freedoms, and that my opponent is a threat to our democratic institutions. That my opponent, by virtue of campaigning actively with white supremacists or wearing a Confederate uniform or doing some of the other extreme and dangerous things he's done, like saying he wants to take away a woman's right to choose without exception and to jail doctors who perform abortions. I mean, that day after day, he comes out with more and more extreme positions that would undermine our institutions, our public, and our democracy. And so we're seeing more and more Republicans just say, you know what, that's a bridge too far. I care too much about the stakes in this race, and I'm going to put Commonwealth and country ahead of party. And so I'm really, to be honest with you, I'm very humbled by that. Because again, I know these are folks who I don't agree with on everything, and they don't agree with me. But the fact is, we're fighting for something far bigger than party and far bigger than any one election. But we're really fighting to protect our democracy.
Talking about fighting for things and far, bigger than issues. One issue that's been very important to a lot of people in Pennsylvania is the maternal mortality rates here. And with the Dobbs decision, a lot of people are fearful that is going to increase the maternal mortality, particularly in African-American women. Can you just talk about some of the policies your administration would take to protect reproductive health access?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, let's sort of show how clearly different he and I are on this issue. And then we'll talk about maternal health, if I may, Miracle. Here in Pennsylvania, as a result of the Dobbs decision, our state law is in effect when it comes to reproductive rights. Our state law just simply says that a woman can have an abortion up to 24 weeks, and post 24 weeks, if the woman's life or health is at risk, she can have an abortion. That's the law in Pennsylvania today. My opponent, Doug Mastriano, has said his number one priority is to sign a bill into law that bans abortion, with no exceptions, not in the case of rape or incest or even to save the life of the woman, and then wants to jail doctors who perform those abortions. He'll sign that bill into law. I will veto that bill and trust the women of Pennsylvania to make decisions over their own bodies. And listen, someone's making a choice. I don't think it should be the politicians in Harrisburg. I think it should be the woman making a choice for herself. We know that if we further restrict or curtail reproductive freedoms, it is going to have a particularly negative effect on Black women. We have seen that in other states. We've seen it in our neighbors in West Virginia and Ohio, where women are now kind of flooding across the state borders into Pittsburgh in order to get reproductive health care. We've seen in particular Black women be negatively impacted in those states. We know that that same thing will happen here in Pennsylvania if Doug Mastriano gets his way and decides to ban all abortion. We need to also do some affirmative things to help Black women when it comes to reproductive freedom and healthcare. I will sign legislation to extend pregnancy-related Medicaid eligibility to 1 year postpartum in order to cover that help. Also cover doula services in order to make sure that women get additional help. We're going to expand healthcare access for women in their homes. So we're going to expand that sort of mobile healthcare option. And I'll sign legislation to award healthcare providers that eliminate health inequities and increase the number of Black physicians in our communities. So I want to support legislation. It's not just stopping the bad stuff from happening. I want to support legislation that's affirmative, that's forward-looking, and that can help address some of the healthcare challenges that exist in the Black community. And of course, you know, as Attorney General, and this helped everybody, when Highmark and UPMC spent 10 years fighting with each other, and they were just days away from denying 2 million people in Western Pennsylvania access to healthcare and to their doctors. I was able to bring both sides together and hammer out an agreement that protected access to healthcare for millions of Western Pennsylvania women and others. So I've always been focused on trying to make sure healthcare access is available for everybody, dealing with the healthcare inequities that exist, whether it's in the Black community or rural communities in Pennsylvania. And we've got a lot of work to do that, but I'm focused on making sure it happens.
Josh, thanks for that. You alluded to earlier in our conversation about defending our democracy. Can you talk about how you feel voting will change, or how elections will be administered, you know, if your opponent, you know, was successful in November? Because you framed it as, you know, we are fighting for our democracy. How will the democratic process change? Obviously, in your words, in a negative way, if your opponent is successful.
So let's just take the typical Allegheny County voter, right? They go to their local school, local church, wherever they cast their ballot, all right? They're walking into a place to cast their ballot that is being run by the Allegheny County Voter Services Office. I forget the specific title, but the voter services in Allegheny County. But sitting atop that is a person known as the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State oversees the elections all across Pennsylvania. What's unique in Pennsylvania is that the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor. They're not elected separately. And the governor has the power to certify the winner of the elections, including the next presidential race. Now, in the past, you'd say, well, that's just kind of ceremonial, right? If Miracle got one more vote than Kahari, well, Miracle wins that election. It's sort of like not something you'd think about. Except enter Doug Mastriano, my opponent. He, by the way, same guy that was part of the mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, trying to stop your vote from being counted, right? But he has already said he would use his power as governor to decertify a certain number of voting machines in order to pick the winner or certify the winner of his choosing. Think about that for a minute, right? The governor has the power to do that, but he is now saying he would use that power to pick the winner, which means whoever you guys want to be the winner, if it's not his choice, that person's not going to win, even if that person got more votes than the other one. That is scary. That is dangerous. And Kari, the reason why I say it's so dangerous for our democracy, it's not just robbing a Pennsylvanian of their vote. It's making clear to the rest of the country that you can't rely on Pennsylvania to respect the will of the people, and then you've got an illegitimate election. When you have that, think about what happens to our law and order in our communities. Think about what happens to the stock market. Think about what happens to a business and whether or not they can trade with partners in other states or other nations. No one's going to have confidence in us to be able to do this work in the economy and law enforcement or wherever if our democracy is undermined by the will of Doug Mastriano. That is very, very real as a threat because he said he's going to do it. And it is very, very real when it comes to undermining our democracy. Austin and I were in Philly yesterday. Austin Davis, who's going to be our lieutenant governor. And Austin made a great comment. He said, when people tell you who they are and what they're going to do, believe them. He says grandma taught him that. And by the way, that's a good life lesson. This guy is telling us he's going to take away your vote so he can pick the winner. He's telling us he's going to do that. That is incredibly dangerous for our democracy, and we need to stop him.
Talking about things that are dangerous, we know Pennsylvania also is home of one of the unfortunately active, militant supremacist organizations throughout Pennsylvania. We know the Tree of Life and other instances. Extremism is a real issue and concern for many people. What is one of the plans that your administration will put into would enact in order to curb the amount of extremists and extremist groups that are present within our region?
Well, my opponent is giving a haven, giving protection to these extremist groups who don't believe that you or I belong here. There's a parade in suburban Philly that was part of my district as I was starting out in politics. It's called the Glenside Parade. I love it. It's just like a great family event. We all have parades and stuff that we enjoy doing. This one's on July 4th. I've marched in that parade 20 years. This year, my opponent, they brought the 3 Percenters, one of these extremist organizations, to march in that parade carrying the flag of the 3 Percenters, carrying the flag of one of these dangerous extremist groups. That is who he is. We need to defeat that. And then when I'm governor, we need to move forward to protect ourselves from those extremism. I want to expand our hate crimes law to be able to include more folks, because I fundamentally believe that no matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love, who you pray to, if one person is attacked because of a particular characteristic, it makes us all less safe. It undermines all of our safety and security and well-being. So I want to update our laws to include more people in our hate crimes laws. I want to make sure that our prosecutors have an easier time of being able to prosecute hate crimes and hold them accountable, hold those accountable who do that. I want to make sure that we are in a much stronger position to combat hate, to speak out against it, and not elevate people to positions of authority who want to welcome those hate groups into the mix. I think we need to speak in a clear voice against them. The day after Tree of Life, when I was speaking at something in Pittsburgh, I said very clearly, leaders need to speak and act with moral clarity. My opponent doesn't speak or act with moral clarity. If anything, what he's doing is the exact opposite, bringing these dangerous extremists into the mix. All leaders, Democrat, Republican, need to stand up and speak out against this extremism.
As we wrap with you, can you just talk about what is bringing you joy? It's our one closer question that we always do for all of our guests. Even just a quick, 15 seconds, what's bringing you joy?
It's easy. Our 4 kids. I mean, I don't get enough time with them, but those few minutes that I get with them, not every day, but most days, just given the rigors of this campaign trail, man, I just look at them and I smile, and it just brings me joy. And then if you could let me play hoops with them at the same time, that's double joy. So that's my thing. I love basketball, love my kids. And when we can combine that, that gives me great joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. I know we're right at the time, so I want to thank you so much for joining us. Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and Democratic nominee for governor, and what has been called by many pundits the most important governor's race in the country, and maybe one of the most important governor's races in the history of the United States. So thank you so much again, Josh. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Hope to talk to you again soon on the trail, and be safe and take care.
Sounds good. And we'll see you tomorrow in the Labor Day parade here in Pittsburgh. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Shapiro.
Thank
Have
you.
a great rest of your evening.
You too. See you soon, guys.
And that has been Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who's a candidate for governor here in Pennsylvania. We want to thank him so much for taking time out of his busy campaign trail to sit down and talk with us for a few moments. But there's so much happening here in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania with the 100 Media team. Please make sure you are registered to vote by October 24th. Please make sure your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones who are eligible to vote are also registered to vote. And we have a really cool event coming to you on the 18th of September that Kari is going to talk about. We want to make sure you mark it on your calendars.
Absolutely. We're going to be doing a big fall kickoff canvas, a day of action for protecting our freedoms with Ben the Arc Justice. And we're also going to be with Pennsylvania United. We're going to meet at the entry garden of Highland Park around 9:30, 10 a.m. The official flyer will go out next week. That's September 18th. We're going to get out and knock some doors before the Steeler game. We're not going to be knocking on any doors during the Steeler game. So we're going to get out about 9:30, 10. We're going to have some speakers. I know Mayor Gainey's going to be in the house. Chris DeLuzio, a candidate for Congress, is going to be in the house, and some other elected officials and local leaders will be in the house as well. And folks are going to get out to the East End and go into areas like Millvale, Edna, Sharpsburg, knock on some doors, come back, have some fellowship, and then head home to watch the Steeler game. So, yeah, it's going to be a great event. I want to thank the folks from Ben the Arc and Pennsylvania United for really getting involved and figuring out really creative ways for how the organizations can work together to really raise the importance of this year's midterms. Obviously, we heard from, one of the highest profile candidates in the country talk about the importance of the midterm elections here in Pennsylvania just now.
And so we want to encourage everybody to make sure you register to vote. Just earlier this week, it was announced that the Pennsylvania administration is doing one-off pardons for people who have been impacted only by marijuana convictions. And right now you have until the 30th of September to apply for that. So if you want to know what is impacting your vote, what are the consequences of voting, is you get really cool policies sometimes that pop up and it impacts and improves the lives of everyday people. So please make sure you're registered to vote. With that, I'm Miracle, and with Kahari Mosley, we're signing off. We hope you enjoy a good rest of your week and your Labor Day weekend.